One is the few, and it ends with the last prophet, the Prophet Muhammad. That's the inward manifestation of Islam, the beliefs. And there's the outward manifestation of Islam, the practices of Islam. And so here is where we talk of the Shahada, the testimony of faith, where Muslims says this regularly, and anyone who accepts Islam also says this. The prayer that you will see Muslims practicing, and when you go to Muslim countries, this is something you will see a lot. The charity that is given, known as zakat, these are the Arabic terms. Fasting, known as siyam, many people call it Ramadan. Ramadan is the name of the month, by the way. It is not the act itself. The act itself is called siyam. And the pilgrimage, the going to Mecca once in a lifetime. And I just want to say a little bit about the Shahada. So how does one accept Islam? Once one understands those beliefs that I just told you about, then they say, or they pronounce this statement that I bear witness that there is no deity worthy of worship except Allah, as I also bear witness that Muhammad is only a messenger and servant of God. This is known as the Shahada. So someone who is from the military who become a Muslim, someone can ask them sometimes, oh, when did you take your Shahada? They're really asking, when is it that they say this statement in their lives? And of course, they'll say, well, 10 years ago, 3 years ago, or I was born Muslim, etc. This is one misconception that is circulated around a lot. Anytime you see somebody standing in prayer and doing these movements, these are the movements of prayer, then it alarms people. And I was in a mall recently and prayer time came in, because prayer time cannot be postponed in Islam. You have to do it at a given time. It's 5 times daily. And at that specified time, I found a corner in the mall that wasn't really busy. And I started praying, and I could see from the corner of my eye that there's a lot of anxious looks that were standing around looking at me and wondering what am I going to do next after that, right? So, just beware that Muslims do pause during their life, during the day, so that they can turn to God, face God, and say a word of prayer. And again, in that process, ask God for guidance in this life. And so this is a series of pictures that gathered Muslim children praying in Mombasa, Kenya, and they're gathered for the Eid prayer. And so Eid prayer, or prayers sometimes, if you go to the Muslim world, such as in Mumbai, in a corner of Mumbai that is populated by Muslims, I captured this picture, and there were Muslims, the streets were closed down because the mosque was full, and they used the outside space to pray. So you'll experience stuff like this in the Muslim world, and it will take you back sometimes, and it should not be perhaps misunderstood that these are radical people, why are they doing this, and so. But prayer is so important to Islam, and that Islam is incomplete without prayer. Muslims praying in Abidjan, in Africa, West Africa. Muslims praying in Indonesia. Of course, the Hajj, the pillar of Islam that involves a lot of attention, and there's a lot of media attention, special programs, National Geographic, CNN, wherever it is. But their attention is directed towards Mecca, which is really the center of Islam, based in Saudi Arabia, and a city that is probably the largest sanctuary of any religion on earth, because during that time, at any given moment, there may be up to 2 million people gathered or more, as in the last Hajj that was about 2 months ago or so. There was almost, I understand, 3 million people, and all dressed in white, in the same dressing, whether you're rich or poor, white or black, everybody sort of dresses in the same way. A sign of equality during worship to God and observation of that particular aspect of Islam. Many questions are asked about Sunnis and Shia, the world attention to the conflict in Iraq and Iran and other places. Just know that Sunnis are about 85%. If you ever wondered why there is Sunnis and Shiites, this really was non-existent before. By the time we had the 4th Caliph, some 50 years or so after the death of the Prophet of Islam, to whom be peace, some sort of political separation started. And again, the term is political, because the Shiites believe that the ruler of the Muslims should be from the line of the Prophet and the descendants and the great-grandchildren, etc., of the line of the Prophet. The Sunnis differ in that regard. they said that the one who is most qualified and selected by the democratic process, again re-emphasizing democracy in Islam, that this is the person then that becomes the ruler of the Muslims. Right? So this misconception, I was in Turkey 2 years back, and they say, you know, when you read newspapers, you get an idea of what's happening in that country, right? So in the morning, getting breakfast in a hotel, I opened a newspaper, and a Turkish woman, a Muslim woman, was wrote an article explaining how Islam is responsible for the backwardness that we see in the Muslim world. That didn't sit very well with me because I traveled through many parts of the Muslim world, and I wrote a response back. I'm not sure if it got published, but it certainly became a subject of a sermon that I gave later on here in Nashville, replying to the accusation that Islam is backward. Because if you look, you'll find that Islam has its time in history, and it did at one time in what is known as the golden age of Islam, around this period of history between 800 to 1500 CE. And as you can imagine, the major advancements in medicine, the oldest manuscript in the National Library of Medicine in DC, Washington, DC, is by a Muslim physician known as Ibn Sina. It's still there, I saw it myself. Al-Khawarizmi, where we acquire a lot of the knowledge of algebra, is derived from certainly a Muslim mathematician. Law and philosophy, those of us who study this at universities, you will hear this name a lot. History of Ibn Khaldun, and many others of the like. You just have to travel the world and you will see in places like Spain, many of these places now have been converted to churches and museums, but otherwise they were mosques before. In Cordoba, such marvelous architectural achievements in Europe at a time when such achievements were not possible because Europe was going through its own dark ages at that time, right? And I visited Turkey, Istanbul. The Blue Mosque is a fascinating structure and certainly an architectural masterpiece in Istanbul. And it is directly opposite of the Hagia Sophia, Istanbul. And when you ask a story of why this was built directly opposite of this, because this used to be a Christian basilica before, during Constantine, you will remember history. And when Muslims conquered Constantinople and Islam entered into that part of the world, this particular structure was converted to a mosque, and minarets were introduced later on. They're not part of the original structure. And so the Turkish people have an interesting story. They said, as an answer back to this structure, that Muslims are incapable of building a magnificent structure of this type, then they answer back with this structure, the Blue Mosque. So it faces the Hagia Sophia. If you stand on one side, you see the Hagia Sophia, on the other, the Blue Mosque. But Turkey is full of such architectural masterpieces. And you just have to go to Dubai, the recent attention to the world's tallest building, and so-called the artist's impression of how Dubai will look the year 2050. I hope the building will still be there. They say that it's allow a movement of up to 4 feet to sway. I don't know if I want that experience being up here, you know, so, right? Anyway, it created a lot of attention when this building was opened. Now it's the world's tallest building, of course. And just like is the new in the Muslim world, there's also the old. And I visited Yemen many years back, and I was fascinated on top of many mountains. There were structures like these of villages and terraces that were farmed by Yemenis. Now, you know, if you talk to a Yemeni in this corner of Yemen, and you ask them even, who is the United States? What is this war? What is terrorism? They have no idea what is going on. All they're concerned about is what can they do to feed their families. And it's amazing when you see that, you know. So it's not that they're detached from the rest of the world, but just to show you that a lot about countries like these that sometimes come up in the media and they're being stereotyped, that there's a lot of beauty there and a lot of appreciation of good people. And I travel with American tourists, you know, right? And we felt so welcomed and visited their homes and so on. So, in the understanding about misconceptions, you will appreciate one of the misconceptions about women in Islam. And when I posed these pictures and I asked around the room, and we could take that census right here, and you will hear the same kind of responses. When I asked about this Algerian woman who is covered, and